Salutations from warm and sunny Northern California. My name's Candy Andy, and today we're going to explore the multifaceted and often controversial history of the morning meal, referred to as the most important meal of the day, breakfast. But before we get into that, Red Bull, sponsor me. All right? I'm going to crack into this ASMR. I drank too much. If you were a child during the early 2000s, then you're most likely familiar with the classic hit television show SpongeBob SquarePants. In the 2004 episode Missing Identity, SpongeBob has a little song that he performs for Gary each morning before he feeds him his breakfast. Most important meal of the day, serve Gary's way. As a 6 to 7 year old, this was my first time hearing this sentiment. Most important meal of the day, breakfast. If you're anything like me, a human, you enjoy to eat. Out of all the meal times, I personally prefer breakfast since I feel like I can be more creative and I have more options. Of course, I love snacks, I love lunch, I love dinner, and I love a merienda, which, depending on where you're from, it consists of cafecito con pan, eaten at night prior to bedtime, kind of as a way to end the day. But is the morning meal all just a conspiracy? A big conspiracy crafted by big cereal to promote their products and beliefs? Join me as we delve further into the topic at hand. For today's video, I read a couple of articles and kind of put all that information together based on what I've read. Y'all, I don't even. Okay, first of all, my phone stopped recording. I finished this. And then the fucking video was out of focus the whole fucking time. So here's the thing. I have a fucking bootleg operation going on, okay? I'm so sorry. We're gonna roll with it. According to our good friend Wikipedia, in Old English, a regular morning meal was called morgen mete. I'm probably saying that incorrectly, but that's okay. We're just gonna roll with it. The word dinner, which originated from Gallo-Romance desjunare, which means to break one's fast, around the mid 13th century, that meaning of dinner faded away. And around the 15th century, breakfast came into use in written English to describe a morning meal. Now, what did the ancient breakfast look like? I'll tell ya. According to the old European restaurant, Greek and Roman breakfast dishes weren't as common as eating breakfasts today. It wasn't a meal that was eaten every day, and not all people ate breakfast. During the archaeological period, the New Stone Age, Neolithic people would often eat a simple porridge of ground grains. In ancient Egypt, breakfast foods that were considered staples for peasants, the working poor, and slaves typically consisted of bread, beer, and onions. Ancient Greeks' meals eaten after rising and before commencing work was referred to as ariston or akratisma, which typically consisted of various foods but were rather simple. For example, they had barley bread dipped in wine, pancakes from spelt flour with figs and olives. The Romans' breakfast was often referred to as a simple affair. Their common staples was bread, cheese, olive, nuts, cold meats from the previous night's dinner, and possibly a salad of some kind, which kind of sounds like a charcuterie board. So that's fun because I love charcuterie boards. Perhaps that's where they came from. They also had this wine based cocktail called mulsum that's made with wine, honey, and spices. And that was like their common breakfast drink. Like they were having a good time for breakfast. And now people drink mimosas for brunch, which is interesting because later on we're going to talk about like what became more popular, like beverages, like breakfast beverages. Now, moving on from the ancient times, we're going to move into the Middle Ages. Eating breakfast was forbidden for most people by the religious authorities of the medieval times. Breakfast was seen as like a very religious ritual of some sort, like, oh, you have given your mind and your body to a god, and for X amount of hours you have not eaten up until almost the Renaissance, breakfast was mostly reserved for children, old people, and the working class. The upper classes didn't really partake in breakfast as a meal in the morning, and only two formal meals were eaten per day, one at midday and one in the evening. So, because of this, monarchs would spend a lot of time around the table for their meals, kind of just like lounging, you know? Around this time, we still hadn't seen the introduction of meat as a morning meal. By the 15th century, breakfast in Western Europe often started to include meat. By this time, noblemen were seen indulging in breakfast, kind of making it more of a common practice. And by the early 16th century, recorded expenses for breakfast became customary. So, we already talked a little bit about how beverages in the ancient times and the Middle Ages was mostly like beer, wine, cocktails, whatever. By the 16th century, we saw the introduction of caffeinated beverages into the European diet as an addition to breakfast, like tea and coffee, which are still staples to this day. And around the late Renaissance and early classical period, pastries and sweet fruits also became popular breakfast items, such as in Austria, where the croissant was invented in the 1680s. Now let's get into the modern breakfast. And I'm going to start with North America because I am North American. I originate from Mexico and I grew up in the United States. So I talk about what I know to a certain extent. So, an interesting thing that I learned is the first group known to have produced maple syrup and maple sugar were the indigenous people. They were living in the northeastern part of North America. And so, according to Aboriginal oral traditions, as well as some archaeological evidence, maple tree sap was being processed into syrup long before Europeans arrived in the region. So, that's just another thing that indigenous people created and then was. Anyway, I'm going to focus a little bit on typical Aztec breakfast just because I think it's interesting. But they would often include corn porridge with honey and chiles. And they also had tortillas with beans and salsa. Chilaquiles apparently go back to the Aztec times, which I didn't know. And if you're, familiar with Mexican cuisine, like chilaquiles is a pretty like popular breakfast option. It's like available in most like Mexican restaurants and stuff like that. I'm used to eating it. My mom makes it all the time. I had a job where we had like free breakfast. They had chilaquiles like every Wednesday or something, and they were actually pretty fucking good. And I really enjoyed them. But anyway, chilaquiles are fucking lit. And apparently, I'm telling you, they go back until the Aztec times, which I didn't know. That's so interesting. Pero chilaquiles, if you're not familiar, it depends also, I think, like where you come from. According to Wikipedia, chilaquiles consist of tortilla chips. They're slathered in salsa, and they usually comes with a side of refried beans. Depending on the region or person, they may be eaten with fried or scrambled eggs, pulled chicken, sprinkled cheese, crema, sour cream, diced onion, and chopped cilantro. In general, eggs are also a staple in Mexican breakfast. Scrambled and fried eggs are usually eaten with tortillas, salsa, beans, and then there's a variety of like huevos rancheros, which are like scrambled eggs or fried egg with corn tortillas. Breakfast cereals are also common in Mexico, mainly due to US American influence. So, cereal, I mentioned at the beginning, big cereal, right? Dude, oh fuck, it's a whole thing. I'm gonna start getting into it. In 1620, in the US, common breakfast products included corn pone, Johnny cakes, ash cakes, hoe cakes, and corn dodgers. Okay, so we obviously cannot talk about breakfast without talking about cereal, and we cannot talk about cereal without talking about this man that I'm going to tell you about right now. Something fell. My wall. It literally went behind the. It went behind the mueble. I can't grab it right now. In 1863, Dr. James Caleb Jackson, who ran a sanatorium, which is an establishment for the medical treatment of of people who have chronic illnesses or are recovering from said illnesses or operations. So he ran a sanatorium in upstate New York, and that's where he invented what he called granula. Okay, it's a recipe made from water and dried gram flour broken into pieces, and reportedly the stuff was so hard that it had to be like mixed with milk to be edible, and that's kind of how breakfast cereal was born. The invention of the granula was inspired by Dr. Jackson's belief that the digestive system was the root of our health, and his invention was mimicked by a person who I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and his name is John Harvey Kellogg. My accent is slipping out a lot when I try to say this word, so we're just gonna go with it, okay? Mr. Kellogg was a physician, visited Dr. Jackson's sanatorium, and he worked for Ellen White, who was the founder of the Seventh day Adventism and a patient of Dr. Jackson. In the late 19th century, Mr. Kellogg ran a celebrated sanatorium of his own in Battle Creek, Michigan, referred to as the Vatican of the Seventh day Adventist Church, according to a historian, Howard Markle. So Mr. Kellogg was a member of the church, which often promoted wellness, like that was like their thing. And he was this is slightly inappropriate, but like not really. I guess it depends on how you feel about this topic, but it's a part of the history. We're gonna have to talk about it. So Mr. Kellogg was extremely worried about self-pleasure, believing that it could lead to a bizarre list of problems from unattractiveness to insanity, which is like, excuse me, no. But anyway, so he thought that a bland diet could help tackle the problems of indigestion and masturbation. So Mr. Kellogg came up with his own recipe, his own version of granula. However, a lawsuit unfolded and Dr. Jackson forced him to change the name to granola. So Mr. John Kellogg and his brother, Will Kellogg, invented cornflakes. But apparently these two did not get along. The brothers, the two, John and Will, they did not get along, and so they parted ways in the early 1900s. But Mr. Will bought the recipe, he added sugar to the flakes, and founded the company that we know today. So here we go with the patients. First, it was the Ellen White lady, and now we got this dude named C.W. Charles William Post. So he was a patient at Mr. Kellogg's sanatorium. And according to Sarah Pruitt, who writes for History, The Big History, C.W. didn't have the funds to continue his stay at the sanatorium. So then he made his way by working in the kitchen, and he was able to observe the cereal making process here. In 1897, he invented grape nuts, trying to one up his former employer. So now I'm just going to kind of rapid fire some facts about cereals because it's literally the whole thing. So, anyway, in 1927, according to the Kellogg Company history, William Kellogg was charmed by the crackling sound of milk on toasted rice, which was how Rice Krispies came to be. Then, if you're familiar with Chex, I've never had Chex cereal, but I know what it is, but I've never had it. But the origin story is very strange. Originally, they were called shredded Ralston. I don't know how to say that. And the cereal hit the shelves in the 1930s. It had deep ties to a Webster Edgerly. Y'all, I don't know how to say his fucking name, who led a health movement / cult known as Ralstonism, and he also believed in eugenics and mind control. But nowadays, Chex are made by General Mills. Cheerios were made in Buffalo, New York in 1941. Despite their shape, they weren't initially called Cheerios, they were called Cheeriots. The city of Buffalo in New York occasionally smells like Cheerios due to General Mills plant that produces the cereal. So if you're from Buffalo, if you live in Buffalo, let me know. Is that true? So yeah, that's the wild ass history of cereal, which is such a staple of the US American breakfast. And as we learned before, it influenced the Mexican breakfast. You know, people in Mexico eat cereal for breakfast all the time. But yeah, dude, crazy ass fucking history. Like, I I can't look at cereal the same way, and not in a bad way, but like crazy. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about marketing for breakfast. It's all a fucking lie, y'all. It's what I've learned. It's all a fucking lie, okay? Eat the fucking shit that you want to eat. In 1944, there was a marketing campaign that was named Eat a Good Breakfast, Do a Better Job. This is a message that Big Breakfast kind of runs with. Eat good breakfast. Go work your corporate job. Make us money. With this marketing campaign, grocery stores handed out pamphlets that promoted the importance of breakfast. There were radio advertisements that announced nutrition experts say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And then in the 1950s, sugar sort of became the selling point, right? The Kellogg Company introduced sugar frosted flakes in 1952. And then the introduction of the cartoon mascots for cereal kind of helped fuel this trend, the sugar trend. We know Tony, the Italian American tiger. There's Toucan Sam, who's the Fruit Loops dude. Captain Horatio Magellan Crunch. Lucky the Leprechaun. In 1971, Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble began promoting Fruity and Cocoa Pebbles. So pretty much with that, kids were the target audience and sugar was the ingredient. So after a while, the American breakfast grew and it sort of became like a dinner. Lowell Dyson, agricultural historian, wrote of food preferences in 19th century America, saying Americans wanted meat, 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 and potatoes, and cake, and pie. So all of this sort of extended to breakfast, and then we started to see beefsteaks and roasted chickens on the American breakfast tables. Then came the complaints of chronic indigestion, which was referred to by nutritionists and reformers as dyspepsia. So there you go. Well, that's the history of breakfast according to moi. Final thoughts. I don't know. My idea started as like I wanted to talk about breakfast for dinner as a concept. So that's what this started as. It was kind of weird because I couldn't find like a specific answer to the question that I was questioning. But from that, I got into this whole like big cereal conspiracy. And it's like, guys, it's not a conspiracy about the American breakfast. So yeah, that's it. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you learned something. I learned something. If there's anything that I missed, let me know. I appreciate you for watching this video. Share the video with your parents. Like the video to eat one bowl of cereal, and comment what are your favorite breakfast foods and where are you from? What do y'all eat in your part of the world for breakfast? Gotta go.